Hi, and welcome back to 10-Minute Bible. So in these 10-Minute Bible videos, I try to bring out some of the core things and some of the things that might be a bit surprising that show up in the stories. I think oftentimes people assume that the Bible is kind of a loose collection of stories that don't really hang together very well and are probably not all that meaningful unless you're a bit gullible or that kind of thing. But I don't think that's at all a characterization of the Bible that really works. I think the Bible, when you follow it and allow it to speak in the way that it needs to be heard, can create an incredible impression on anyone, and it is ultimately meant to open us up to God and to a way of life that He has for us. So, especially in the stories of Jesus. So I think some of this will come out in also this very short video, but I think I try to make some of these things come out in all of the videos. So I hope you'll be able to watch a number of them, and I hope that you will follow the channel and subscribe to it for those reasons. So we're looking at chapter 8 in Luke's version of Jesus' life. We've been following Luke up to this point, and we're going to keep doing that. Last time we also were in chapter 8, and we looked at a story that Jesus told and then his interpretation of the story. We skipped a very short section in which Jesus discusses with his disciples why he's telling stories in the first place. So it's a short passage. I'll read it and then I'll make a couple of comments about it. So Jesus' disciples asked, "Why did you tell this story?" And Jesus said, "You've been given insight into God's kingdom. You know how it works. There are others who need stories, but even with stories, some of them are not going to get it. Their eyes are open, but they don't see a thing, and their ears are open, but they don't hear a thing." So Jesus, in quoting these two lines, their eyes are open and their ears are open, he's quoting a couple lines from the Old Testament, from the pre-Jesus part of the Bible, which is the larger part of the Bible, the first 2/3. And he's quoting from a passage there, and I think in that passage it's that those two lines are meant as a kind of a judgment on the listeners. You know, you're seeing, but you're not really willing to really see what's there. Your ears are open, but you're not really willing to listen to what's really going on. That is, they weren't really listening or willing to receive God's message or see what He had for them. I think with Jesus, he's taking these same two lines and he's kind of working with them a little bit in this sense. So, you know, we find that in our own times as well, that just giving people facts doesn't work for everyone. Some of us need stories in order to learn. And the idea with a story is that it kind of gets under your skin and you're kind of drawn into it. And before you know it, you've picked up on what it is that the storyteller is trying to teach. He or she's not just interested in telling you a nice story, but there's a teaching, a lesson, a moral or something going on in the story that we're meant to pick up. And this is why Jesus tells stories, because there are those who kind of are resistant to the real message of God. They listen, but they hear, but they don't really want to get it, or they're seeing these things that Jesus is doing, but they don't really want to see. And so the story is a way of getting through some of that, cutting through some of it. There still will be those who resist, and maybe they'll need a bit more work. But this is ultimately, I think, why Jesus tells stories, so that people are not left blind or deaf to the real message of God, but so that it's God's way, it's Jesus' way of really trying to reach out to them and to us. So this is a powerful thing to think about. Stories can be God's way of reaching out with determination, with persistence to us. So that passage was in the middle of, at the one side, Jesus telling a story, and on the other side, his interpretation of the story. And you can read that or take a look at the previous video, and you'll see that. Now I'm going to move on to past to where he interprets, and I'm going to read a couple more lines. I'm using, by the way, a Bible version called The Message, which is I think, very, very helpful. Anyway, Jesus says, "No one lights a lamp and then covers it with a wash tub or shoves it under the bed. No, you just set it on a lampstand so that those who enter the room can see their way." We're not keeping secrets. We're telling them. We're not hiding things. We're bringing everything out into the open. So be careful that you don't become misers of what you hear. Generosity begets generosity. Stinginess impoverishes. So that's probably a little Jewish saying that Jesus is repeating at the end of this section. But what he's trying to say to his disciples is that he knows what it is that the people need to hear from God. And so he's laying it out there for everyone to see and to hear. They're not keeping secrets, and we're not hiding things. We're bringing everything that God has given to us out into the open to share with people. And he's also got a little warning for his disciples. You might think of yourselves as being especially privileged or something like that because you're learning directly from me and we're spending a lot of time together talking through things. But be generous with what God has given to you. Share the stories. Tell the good news. Generosity begets generosity. When you give, more will be given to you. If you're stingy, your stinginess will result in your having even less than you started out with. Okay, next section. And this is very interesting because you wouldn't expect it to end the way it does. So we discover that Jesus' mother and brothers showed up, but they couldn't get through to Jesus because of the crowd. Jesus was given this message: your mother and brothers are standing outside the house probably, wanting to see you. So his family, I think in one of the other versions of this, what comes out a bit is that his family kind of thinks that Jesus ought to tone it down a little bit. Jesus, you're becoming too, I don't want to say fanatical, but you're really going overboard with all this traveling and teaching, and you're going to tire yourself out. So pace yourself a little bit. Maybe that was it, or anyway, they can't get to him directly, so they give a message to be relayed to Jesus, and so he hears that his mother Mary, and Jesus has brothers. They're outside wanting to see you, and so Jesus sometimes can be a bit of an opportunist, and I don't mean that in the negative way that we usually think of it, but I mean that he would take things that were said to him, or things that were presented to him, or things that just showed up as he was traveling, and he would take these as opportunities to make an important point. And this is what he does here. He says, "My mother and brothers are the ones who hear and do God's word. Obedience is thicker than blood." Now, I think this is kind of a free-flowing translation of the original, but the point is right on the money. So Jesus is really saying that, he's not trying to put down his mother or his brothers. Elsewhere in the story of Jesus, we discover that Jesus is has a profound love for his mother. I think his foster father, Joseph, is no longer present, alive, and so we don't hear much about him. But anyway, Jesus takes this opportunity to say that the family of God is not about bloodlines and human family and DNA, but it's about obeying God's message for our lives. It's about putting into practice what God especially through Jesus, is teaching. It's about taking seriously our taking God seriously and trusting Him. So again, Jesus takes a very ordinary thing, his mother and his brothers kind of trying to reach out to him, and he uses that as an opportunity to say, you people who are around me are my real family. You're my real family. You're putting into practice what I'm trying to say. You are my real family. Which is a neat thing to think about. Oftentimes you will hear people use the expression family of God. Well, that expression has a very credible background in this passage where Jesus speaks this makes this comment. So we are going to now literally keep moving. Jesus and his disciples are traveling, and we see that one day Jesus and his disciples got into a boat. This is a neat story. Let's cross the lake, he said, and off they went. It was smooth sailing, and Jesus fell asleep. I sometimes say that probably he fell asleep because he's exhausted. There's a lot of demands being placed on him. We often find in the stories of Jesus that he's trying to get away from the crowds for a little while, sometimes to pray, but I think also to rest. A lot of demands were made on him in terms of teaching. He was controversial, so a lot of confrontational stuff happening, and he's healing people, so a lot of God's energy is flowing through him and draining out of him. So there is these different aspects of Jesus being tired mentally, emotionally, energy being drained from him, and all these kinds of things. And anyway, he falls asleep in the boat. And a terrific storm came up suddenly on the lake, and water poured into the boat, and the boat was about to capsize. So Jesus is sleeping through all this, I think, as to me kind of suggests that yes, he really was tired. And so they wake Jesus, and Master, we're going to drown. And so Jesus gets to his feet. He tells the wind, silence, and to the waves he says, quiet down. And they did, and the lake became smooth as glass in this version. And he says to his disciples, why can't you trust me? Which sounds a little bit of a dig, because we don't really fault them for being a bit afraid. By all appearances, they were in a lot of trouble, and but there's maybe a little bit of a Jesus again using this opportunity as kind of just a wake up for his disciples. Remain alert. Don't be overwhelmed by every circumstance, but I'm here, and things will be okay. They probably would have been okay even if you didn't wake me up. Anyway, why can't you trust me? And then it says, they were in absolute awe, staggered and stammering. Who is this anyway? He calls out to the winds and the sea, and they do what he tells them. So in this passage, it's a rhetorical question. In other words, it's a question which is not answered directly, but it's one that is left out there for the reader to determine what the answer should be. Who is this? Who is this? Who is this who calls to the winds and the sea, and they do what he tells them? So a question that's meant for you and I to come up with the answer. Well, where are you going to go to find the answer? It is very interesting that in a number of passages, again from the pre-Jesus parts of the Bible, from the Old Testament, God is the one who's revealed as the one who controls the winds and the waves. There's quite a number, but here's one. God, you put the arrogant ocean in its place, and you calm its waves when they turn unruly. God, you do this. So, who is Jesus?